Welcome into the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Glad that you could join us for this episode number 25. We have a great show for you today. The legendary race caller Tom Durkin will join us. He'll talk about some of his favorite moments, and he has called so many of the greatest moments in horse racing for over 4 decades, now enjoying his retirement. But Tom will join us a little later on, and then we'll talk to my friend Emmy Zimmerman as well. She is the vice president at Santa Anita, as well as a producer for NBC of their horse racing coverage. And then Jennifer Kelly, who has written a book about Sir Barton. Remember him? Well, he was the first Triple Crown winner in 1919.
That's right.
And when he won it, nobody knew that he had won a Triple Crown because the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont Stakes, they were all considered just individual horse races at that time, and no one was looking ahead and saying, well, this is part of the start or the middle of the Triple Crown when he did it. So we'll get her take on why she decided to write a book. This is the 100th anniversary. I imagine that has a lot to do with it, of Sir Barton winning the Triple Crown for the first time. But that is some of the things that we'll be discussing. Obviously, we have our crew back with us, which is why we keep doing this. Back there in lead guitar, Scott Hall. Hey. On bass is Ben Chaffins. Yo. Our research, what was that, a yo?
A yo-ho.
A yo-ho.
Yo-ho.
Yo-ho. Very piratey of you.
That's right.
I guess that's all that time you spent down there on that Alabama shore, around that ocean. Right. Arr, matey. And, of course, Mr. Thomas Kenny is with us, our chief researcher extraordinaire. Any other titles you need?
No, that works for me.
That works. Well, Mr. Thomas, you have been researching this Triple Crown, and we said there was no Triple Crown when he won the Triple Crown. What is it? What did he do?
Yeah, I mean, each of the 3 legs of the Triple Crown are races that are dating back to the 1800s. So, I mean, it's definitely been a thing.
Yeah.
Just no one knew what to call it.
Yeah.
There was no reason to call it anything because no one had ever won all 3. 1919, Sir Barton comes around, wins the Triple Crown. Not a Triple Crown at that time, but, we went back retroactively and, confirmed that he is a Triple Crown winner.
Were people even talking about what an accomplishment it was at that time?
Not really. I mean, the term Triple Crown really didn't even surface until the mid-1920s, and it wasn't popular until a turf rider by the name of Charles Hatton for the Daily Racing Form kind of popularized it in 1930. So, people really didn't even consider it an accomplishment. Obviously, that winning races is an accomplishment as good as any.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you need to give it a name?
Yeah, that's true. And at that time, as we talked about, let's see, he won it in, still one of the great bet is what year did the Man of War win the Triple Crown? Because he never ran the Kentucky Derby, never ran in Kentucky.
That's right.
Even though there's a Man of War Boulevard in Lexington, Kentucky. In Lexington, Kentucky, and that's near our studios here, there's a bunch of things named after horses.
Yeah, there's a Sir Barton Way.
A Sir Barton Way, that's right, that connects, if you're ever traveling through the beautiful burg of Lexington, it connects a Winchester Road and Man of War Boulevard over on the east side of Lexington. Just thought we'd throw that out there in case you wonder, what is this Sir Barton? Who was he? Was he like a prince? Was he knighted by a queen? No, Sir Barton. First Triple Crown winner. And that is interesting because somebody had to do something first. And don't you wonder sometimes, Scott and Ben stay up at night worrying about this stuff, Thomas.
That's right. Yep.
I mean, what was the first, it's a chicken egg thing. What happened first? When did this get to be big? I remember watching the first Super Bowl on 2 networks, CBS and NBC, because NBC was doing the AFL, as it still was at the time, and the more established NFL was on CBS. So you had 2 separate broadcasting teams doing the first Super Bowl.
Huh.
I didn't know that.
Because, no one, it's a big horse. It's a big horse race. It's a big football game. Now, years later, and by the way, I was just a kid then. It wasn't like I was in college when the first Super Bowl was. I was even younger than you. Hey, what was that chuckle there?
Oh, there's no chuckle.
I kind of took that as a doubt, my friend. I didn't know, Scott. I thought you were doubting me.
I was just picturing you in a leather football helmet.
I did. I had a little leather football helmet. I was sitting on my daddy's knee watching that first Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I said, Daddy, what is this? And he said, "This is super, isn't it, kid?" I said, "Yeah." No, he didn't say that. Maybe he did. Maybe I could claim we coined the word
how would
super.
you know?
How would we, somebody said Super Bowl at one time. Yep. Just like somebody eventually said Triple Crown. And you know what's interesting? To show you how special, remember Lenny Shulman, when he was on talking about his book Justify, roughly about every 8 to 9 years is when we have a Triple Crown winner.
On average.
On average. We've had 2 very recently, of course. But you think about it, how many Triple Crown winners are alive, Thomas?
Right now, just 2.
Yeah.
That's American Pharoah and Justify.
So right now, there's more than twice the number of living U.S. presidents than there are Triple Crown winners.
It's kind of crazy to think about, huh?
Mr. Carter, Mr. Clinton, Mr. George W. Bush, Mr. Obama, and, of course, Mr. Trump. How about that? You like it when I get into politics, don't you, Scott?
Oh, love it.
Been sitting there monitoring the situation, saying, "I don't know. Let's not go
What's
there."
the DEF CON?
Yeah.
We don't want to go into that.
Yeah.
We don't want to go into that. Did we get downloaded in another country? We're in 15, I understand.
We're 15. Yeah.
We almost got 16.
Almost. Yeah, we had.
But they pushed the button and then put it back.
No. No, our latest out of country download was Tel Aviv.
Yeah, out in Israel.
Oh, okay. Beautiful place. Look at that.
You ever been?
Never been. I watch a lot of travel logs. I like that. I like the Travel Channel a lot. Except when they go eat that crazy stuff. What's that guy, Zimmerman?
Yeah.
Not to be confused with our guest, Amy Zimmerman, today. Is it Zimmerman?
Yeah, I think it is.
That, eats like scorpions and things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm amazed at his stomach. I mean, maybe he drinks a lot of Pepto-Bismol or something. I don't see how he does that. I've been to Europe. I have been through Europe. I've been through Japan and Korea, and I've sampled some dishes, but no, I'm not that exploratory in my eating.
I don't blame you, man.
I've been historically picky. Recent years I've kind of broadened my palate, but definitely no scorpions for me.
How far has this crew broadened their palate, by the way? Well, we've moved from cheeseburgers to roast beef sandwiches? Ben and Scott and Thomas, is that the deal?
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I'm with you guys. I mean, I try some things, but let's face it, I think some of the basic stuff's good. That's why we still have it, isn't it? That's why it's still on the menu.
That's right.
Serving up next. Gosh, don't you love these clever segues? That's why we keep going for 25 shows. Coming up next on the Horse Racing Show, the legendary race caller, as good as it gets, Tom Durkin joins us. And later on, Amy Zimmerman from Santa Anita and from NBC Sports, and Jennifer Kelly, who has written a book about Sir Barton. All that coming up on the Horse Racing Show. Bon appetit. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Glad that you're watching us on YouTube. Thank you for liking and subscribing, listening to us on your iPad or perhaps Google Play or at 93.9 in Louisville. I've been wanting to have this man on. He's as good as it gets. We talked about having guests like that. There's not been a better guy calling a race than Tom Durkin, who has been my friend for many years. I've had the pleasure of working with him at NBC, where he called the races from 84 to his retirement in 2010. Then, of course, New York Racing. He's been the voice of that up until a few years ago. He's enjoying retirement, which means he really hasn't slowed down that much, and Tom joins us now. Welcome in, Tom.
Yeah, I'm a guy without a job, and I just really had to make room for you in my very, very long, busy day. I'll only be able to play 9 holes of golf today, Kenny, because you wanted me on your show.
Well, Tom, I can't thank you enough, and it looks like the weather's letting up, so the worst part's over, as Bill Murray once said out on the course.
Yeah, the worst part is over when I go to the 19th hole.
I know a lot of people want to talk about that match game appearance, but first, before we do that.
Oh, God. Damn videotape. Damn that videotape.
But
you can't, Yeah.
We were talking, and all the guys working here on this show that help keep it going now, they've said the same thing before. it's got to be the toughest thing, and we got sports fans working on this thing. It's the toughest thing to call is a horse race. Because was it Clem McCarthy once said you can't lateral a horse. The horse race to me is the toughest thing for anybody to ever call, and especially when you're calling, like you did for such a great stretch with the New York Racing Association. When you're calling like 8-10 races a day, you got to keep remembering and forgetting, forget. Yeah. I just still am amazed how you did it so well for so long.
Well, you know what? The broadcasters that really amaze me, and I don't know how they do it. Hockey guys. I mean, to me, they are really amazing. I mean, they're constantly shifting players in and out, and the puck moves so fast. And I'm watching on TV, and how do you remember? Who got that goal? It just moves so fast. I've always been impressed with hockey announcers more than anything.
Wow, I bet they would say that about. I bet they say the same thing about horse announcers. I bet Eddie Olczyk would say that.
Yeah, the hard part is just having the ability and learning. I don't think it's any particular ability. I don't have a memory that's better than anybody else's, to tell you the truth. But once you learn how to do it, I think a lot of people would be able to do the job, to tell you the truth. Now that I don't need any competition because I don't have a job, I can say that.
As a friend once asked me, about, doing little stand-ups, which is nothing compared to calling a race, but you'll do a 30, 40-second stand-up. He said, you must have a photogenic mind. I said, well, yes, I think my mind is rather pretty.
Well, people ask me, he said, how do you remember all those horses? And I say, I've got a pornographic memory.
You do have, and I know you do have a pornographic memory. And it all started, I believe this is where it all started. I'm doing a basketball tournament in St. Louis, Missouri several years ago. I'm coming back in, crossing the river. I see Cahokia. I look over there and I see the mounds, okay? And I'm fascinated by history. And I like about especially like the Native Americans and built the mounds. And right across from it, of course, is a racetrack. And I believe Cahokia Downs is where a young Tom Durkin started.
That was one of my first jobs. Yeah. I think it was my second job at a parimutuel track. Yeah. I worked at Florida Downs, as it was then known. It's now Tampa Bay Downs. I guess that was 1977. And I had worked previously at Cahokia Downs as a call taker for the Forum. So I knew the people there and they knew me. And so they hired me. So that was my second job. And my third job was at Miles Park. It was not known as Miles Park then. It was called Commonwealth.
In Louisville.
And I called quarter horse races there.
That I did not know.
Yep.
What haven't you called? What haven't you called?
I've done a lot of harness races now.
You know what? That's where we first met. You won't remember it.
Oh, at Hambo?
I met you in 1983 at the Meadowlands. I was doing an ESPN show. We were doing, he's a Hambletonian. In 83, that's when I met Tom Durkin, the great race caller, right then.
Yeah. I think that was my first or second year there. But I worked there 8 years.
I remember the 89 Hambo with Park Avenue Joe and Probe. I think it's still the only dead heat, isn't it? The only still co-winners of that race.
People ask me what's the most exciting race I've ever called, and that's the answer.
Really?
It was the Hambletonian. I mean, you think of this. Now, back then, the Hambletonian, you had to win 2 heats and be declared the winner. So, and sometimes the races, each heat was divided into 2. Like if 20 horses went there, they had to divide that into 2 sets of 10, and you had to come back and win your second heat. And a little convoluted. That's why they don't have it anymore. I'm sad to say. But anyway, so those horses were coming back for their, I believe it was their 3rd or 4th race that hot August afternoon.
I was there, yes.
And it was a match race. It was just the 2 of them. Now think of this. This is the think of the odds. This is the biggest race in harness racing.
Yeah.
But think of the odds of a match race that ends in a dead heat, especially after these horses have raced 3 times earlier in the day. I mean, it's unbelievable. The odds are there, incalculable, really. And it was a thrilling race, and they had to go to the court. I don't know if this is an apocryphal tale or not, but they had to go to court. The rules were really convoluted as to what would happen if there were a dead heat and what. So wound up in court. But I think what the judge ruled was, okay, one guy gets to keep the money, the other guy gets to keep the trophy.
I would have gone for the money. I just said I like the money.
Absolutely.
I'll make my own trophy. That was your most exciting race. And I understand when you just broke it down like that, because that's one of my favorite races.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was, people are harness races. Yeah. I probably called, 25,000 harness races maybe.
Wow.
I did it there, did it at Balmoral. And as we speak, me and my buddy Joe, we own 3 trotters, and we own a stud, Coraggioso, who, God love him, made $630,000 for us.
Wow. Look at you. Good move, Tom.
I had nothing to do with it. I'm in charge of one thing with the partnership. Joe does everything, selects the horses, does the book work, gets the trainers, keeps everything, notes on the horses and blah, blah, blah. That's but my job is more important. I'm in charge of naming horses.
And you know who would be better than you to name a horse? It's not like you haven't seen a few 100,000 names in harness racing and thoroughbreds.
It's my skill set. What can I tell you?
What's your favorite name that you've given to one of your horses?
Oh, Coraggioso, because he won $630,000.
Brum bum. He's here all week.
What we do? Yeah, don't forget to tip your waitress over here all week. But what I did, I'm an Italophile, and so we had a mare, Electra Hanover, that we bought, and we bought. Listen to this now. We bought her. She was in foal, and her weanling, okay, for $12,000. So we got 2.5 horses for $12,000. So I've forgotten what the weanling's name was, but then once she started having foals for us, I named them alphabetically in Italian, so I could keep track of how old they were and what year they were born and whatever. So we had Bravissimo, Coraggioso, Determinato, Eletrisante, and Fortissimo, which they all mean, brave, courageous, determined, electrifying, and very strong. And that's how we named our trotters. But it's a fun game, and we enjoy doing it.
See, there is the wordsmith that is Mr. Durkin, talking with the great race caller Tom Durkin, who, among other things, has been given the Eclipse Award of Merit, honoring his great career. And I've always marveled at how Tom would keep this journal, and he'd write down words and catchphrases. Because, see, if other people I know, they would say we're going to give them Italian names, it'd be like lasagna, spaghetti. You know our meatball. Hey, here comes meatball down the stretch. You know some of our friends. We have mutual friends like that.
Yeah.
But you did. The preparation you did always fascinated me, and the love of language that you have to this day, and the way you would incorporate phrases, among others. There's cause for concern at Saratoga. I mean, that's still one of the great calls among others that you've made. How did you get into that as opposed to just, what was for so many years you just called the horse race? Guys, great race callers themselves, but they would call the race, and really not a lot of flair to it. They're coming down the track. Here's who's in front. Here's who's second.
Yeah, but those guys, we're going back, 40s, 50s, 60s, some of the 70s. the tracks wanted the patrons above all to think the game was on the level, and that there was no favoritism or whatever, and that's why things were pretty much straight down the line, I believe. So the race calls sounded more like the agatype of the chart, at the quarter, third, 2.5, half, blah 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 blah, lengths and margins in the upper part of the chart. I was more interested in the lower part of the chart where the footnotes were.
Yeah.
Where they said, was in hand, was blocked, was checked, was wide, was moving easily, was an all-out drive, and whatever. I was more interested in the words at the bottom of the chart, and I just started, trying to do that, and then there's only so many words that chart callers would use, so I wanted to, expand that. So I just expanded, like I had in my notebook, you could say, oh, the half mile was fast.
Right.
How many times are you going to say that? So in my notebook, I probably had 40 words for fast.
Wow.
I had a columns. One page was for fast, very fast, extremely fast, and then there was slow, very slow, and extremely slow, and then so I broke those words down into those various columns, and I just read it every day, so that those words and many other situational phrases were just in my subconscious. You just keep on jamming your subconscious with stuff until you don't have to think about it. It's like when you're tying your shoes. It's crazy difficult the first few times, but after you do it, you can tie your it's in your subconscious, so you don't have to consciously think about tying your shoe. You can be having an argument with your girlfriend while you're tying your shoe, and then you just take it off and throw it at her. But after that, so the sub, and I read a lot, and then I moved on to reading a lot about the subconscious mind and how it works, and I would eventually use hypnotism, self-hypnotism, and regular hypnotism. I had every year before the Derby, I used to get very, very nervous, as is natural, as to be expected. You just screw up the Derby, and your life is over. So to beat that, I had a hypnotist in Louisville that I would see every year or so, and get on their Derby week and get hypnotized a couple times. Yeah.
Well,
and I'll tell you one time. Let me interrupt. When one year, and I was really, really, and I've been doing hypnotists before that with when come Breeders' Cup time of year, and from Labor Day to Breeders' Cup Day, I led a monastic life. Even resorted to diet and exercise, if you can imagine the extremity of that.
I have seen you do that, so I can attest to everything you're going to say leading up to the Breeders' Cup. Yes.
So it was, I was, again, I did with this hypnosis thing. And so the guy, the hypnotist, this was is in New York. And I said, he says, do you know the place where the Breeders' Cup is going to be? I said, yeah, it's going to be at Churchill Downs and whatever. And he goes, is there something there that you can see when you're calling the race? Oh, yeah, the Twin Spires. He goes, okay. That was going to be my hypnotic suggestion. That when I saw the Twin Spires, because the booth was right next to the Twin Spires. So when you see those Twin Spires, words will flow easily. Your breathing will be easy. That's very important when you're calling a race and you get nervous.
Yeah.
Your hands will not shake. You will be clear and confident. Words to that effect, pretty much that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great. Breeders' Cup morning, wake up, 1988, and wake up and, okay, it's Breeders' Cup day, buddy. Go out there and get them. You've done everything you can. You're prepared. And opened up, and we were staying at the Hyatt downtown. And opened up the window and went, damn if it's not raining sideways.
Yeah, that's a lousy day.
Yeah.
For weather.
I just think, it's over for you. With the mud, when you're calling races, it throws everything out the window. you can look at a horse and when they're in the mud, it looks like they're moving easily. And you say that, and then another second, they just spit out the bit. And they get full of mud and whatever. It's the worst thing that can happen to a race caller, okay? That and not being able to see because of lighting conditions and what have you. I get in the car, and I might have been in the car with you, Kenny, because we always did you work that derby? I don't think you did.
Not that one. I was there, but I wasn't working the NBC at that time. Yeah.
Brisket, yeah. Because Kenny and I had a tradition of always going to the track every morning.
Still one of my favorite memories. We'll talk about that in a minute. Is Tom and I wrote to every Breeders' Cup and Triple Crown together.
We ride together. Anyway, so I get in that car, and it's like I'm going to the gallows. That's it. My life is over. I'm going to completely screw this up. And because the year before that, 1987, I was so wound up that I was going to just quit and not do it. I just said, after this Breeders' Cup is over, I'm done. I'm going to go get a job teaching or something. But then I said, I'll give it one more try and do the whole hypnosis thing. Anyway, so I'm going to the gallows. I know I'm going to screw up because of the conditions. We're going down 4th Street. We turn right on Central, and there are those two twin spires staring me right in the eye. And I said, come on, baby, let's go. Bring it on.
And so you did.
And completely changed my view all day long. And that was that was the greatest day of horse racing ever. Wayne Lucas won 3 races. In the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, he finished 1, 2, and 4th and 5th.
Yeah.
That was just him. Personal Ensign runs the most unbelievable race you've ever seen in your life, beating the Derby winner at Churchill Downs in the most thrilling race you could imagine. And then the Midnight Classic.
Yes, it
talk
was.
About not being able to see.
I was going to ask you, how'd you call the Classic?
Yeah. You know what? It was like a free pass.
Yeah.
Somebody came over to me before you can't. It looked so much brighter on TV than it was in person, because they open up the irises on the cameras and it really lets in all the light you could possibly imagine. So on TV, it looked much brighter than it really was, but it was dark.
Yeah.
And anyway, so before the race, the guy comes in and goes, Tom, what are you going to do? You won't be able to see the horses. I said, I won't be able to see them ride. Neither will anybody else. And if I make a mistake, who cares? What better excuse can you have than being pitch black? So I was able to call it. It was hard to see him. Now my binoculars were, they brighten up the image too, because the lenses are coated. But yeah, that was just unbelievable. Al Shiva retires the richest horse of all time. That's great.
It was tremendous. I remember that. And I remember not even picking. I was listening to you. That's how I knew where he was. But I wasn't picking anything up till he got within probably the final furlong or so, because I was watching from the stands too and listening to your call on NBC, and I was able to pick it up that way. But I remember you told me about the success you had with hypnosis and seeing those twin spires. That's that's inspiring to a lot of people. And as you have with many of your calls, do you have? We talked about that Hambletonian dead heat in '89. Do you have like a thoroughbred memory? And gosh, I know I'm asking a lot here with the Triple Crowns and the Breeders' Cups, but is there like 2 or 3 calls that you kind of stepped back and said, gosh, I nailed that? I mean, you've nailed thousands, but is there 2 or 3 moments where you go, hey, that's pretty cool?
No, it's not. You don't really think like that. I mean, because after you see the race, because it's post facto, you know what happened.
Yeah.
And you'd like to say there's 7 furlongs to go, and it sure looks like Ali Sheba is going to be able to get up in the. You'd like to say that, but then you can't go out on a limb all the time. You just do you do your best. So after every race, I mean, there's always something I could have done better. So I never really looked at it like you nailed that. Never.
I'll say it. You have nailed it.
You can say that, but I'm not going to say it.
Well, I'll say it. I'm a huge fan. I just, like I say, I mean, I know Larry, and there's some great race callers out there, but, they always talk about that Rushmore. I was like, Mount Rushmore. And, I said, Tom Durkin, you got first guy you carve in Mount Rushmore when you talk about race callers. That in match.
Are you calling me stone-faced? Is that what you're calling me?
Not to your face. I'm behind a mic. Hey, thank you. Tom and I'll be working at Catskills this weekend. You might want to come by. We had more laugh. You know what we should have done was a segment when we were riding over to the races in the car, when NBC would pick us up and take us to the racetrack. Those were some moments.
There's an idea. We can make a fortune, Kenny. 2 men in the car talking.
You almost call this guy.
That'll be it.
You know Jerry Seinfeld, don't you? Call him up and see what he thinks about our idea that we just came up with.
Hey. Forward thinkers. Ahead of our time.
Match game.
Oh,
You're the only. I tell you what, my Aunt Joy, years ago, when Bill Cullen was the host, and they let me out of school, I was like in the second grade, and I got to get out of school to go watch The Price is Right because my Aunt Joy was on it, and she won a mink stole and I think a refrigerator.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Now, the only other person I know personally that has been on a game show is Tom Durkin, who was on one of my favorite game shows, because I always, my influences in life, in my career, were like Tom Snyder and Gene Rayburn and, these guys. And I liked Match Game because of Gene Rayburn. I always thought that was just a fun show, and you were on Match Game.
Yep. And Dave Johnson was actually on To Tell the Truth, if you remember that show.
Yeah, well, then that's three people
back.
I know. Yeah, that's three people I know then, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I was on Match Game. Also was on $20,000 Pyramid, too.
Good gracious, you're multiple. I should have known that.
Yep.
20.
On two of them.
How much did you win on the $20,000 pyramid?
$20,000 pyramid. I was in a tie. 20-20 each, and my partner that day, I was supposed to have Rita Moreno.
Yeah.
Who was really good in Match Game.
Right.
She got sick, and I got this dumbbell soap opera. Oh boy. But anyway, regardless of the bad partner, I got 20 out of 21, and so did the person I was playing against. So we had a tiebreaker and lost that. That's a long story. But so I got fabulous parting gifts. I got 250 packages of sugarless gum.
Wow.
A Billy the Kid boys wear outfit. A osterizer, food preparation things.
Yeah.
I got 10 cases of diet iced tea and 50 pounds of cremettes pasta.
Does it get any better?
No.
Wow. Just saying, if that Rita Moreno, the Tony Award winner, had been there that day, how your life could have changed. You'd won that $20,000. Gosh.
Yep.
You'd had all that chewing gum and iced tea and $20,000. Wow.
Yep.
It would have been life-changing. Life-changing. Now, you've retired, but you're as busy as ever. You're giving tours at Saratoga. You're going to be hosting the upcoming Hall of Fame induction. I don't know. You're doing bar mitzvahs. You're I don't know. What all are you doing? You're busy every time I talk to you.
Yeah, I retired from calling races, but that's as busy as I want to be. I do some voiceover work. Anybody out there? I'm available.
If we had enough money, I'd hire you to do. I'd hire you to say, "Welcome to the Kenny Rice Horse Racing Show," but we can't afford you.
I'll do it as a freebie. Don't worry, Kenny.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
And I got a little recording studio in my basement here in Saratoga. And so do the odd commercial. I'm okay at the voiceover stuff. I'm not okay at getting business. And it's hard to get an agent because up here in Saratoga, it's mostly a New York City game. So,
right.
But I do, I'm doing tutorial stuff for Microsoft and whatever, the odd commercial here and there. So it's good. I enjoy it actually very much.
I'll tell you, not only is he a great race caller, he can do voices. His vocabulary is unlimited, and not only that, he knows a lot of words. And you can call him up, and get him. He'll do voiceover for you. How's that? Well, that was rousing, wasn't it? You need me as an agent, right? Between the two of us, what self-promoters we are.
Yeah, you'll get 10%. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. We're two of the big self-promoters in the business, are we, Tom? Hey, look at us. Hey, look at us. We won a few awards. Yep. You know, one of my favorite calls of yours is Cigar winning the 95 Classic at Belmont.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my favorite calls. But again, that goes back to like a muscle memory, I guess. You have certain phrases or certain words to punctuate the great performances or outstanding showings, and they just come to you then as it comes down the stretch.
Yeah, well, I mean, certain things, you know, if it happens, if you say, if this happens, maybe I'll say that.
Yeah.
But like when Victory Gallop and Real Quiet were in that unsplittable photo.
Yeah.
In the well, I guess that was a
98
Belmont. Yeah.
98. Yeah.
And but Chrysler was sponsoring the Triple Crown that year, and if you won the Triple Crown, you got $5 million.
Yeah.
For winning all three races. And so, like, if Real Quiet, I thought, well, what if Real Quiet gets in a photo? And I'll say, oh, that photo is worth $5 million.
Yeah.
But it came out something like that and whatever. But in the case of Cigar, who was trying to go undefeated for the season, I had a whole bunch of words for undefeated. They were already in the book, and I was used to reading those words and whatever. And then, you know, if he's undefeated, I didn't want to say undefeated. It's a pretty, you know, common word. So I had a whole bunch of different words for a horse that was undefeated. So he's coming down to the finishes, and in terms of phrasing, I realize now he's at the 16th pole. He's going to win. I might as well start the finish call. And so I was thinking of words for undefeated, and I had time to say three words: unconquerable, invincible, unbeatable, Cigar, and that got him to the wire. So that's kind of how my system worked. You know, you just constantly read the book daily, put those words in your subconscious, and hope they come out.
Yeah, nobody did it better. They always came out perfectly, and there's your book. There's something for you to do, and you could read your own book. You could do the audio yourself. I just thought of that.
Now you're talking. Yeah, I might give you 12%.
No, I'm serious. Really, you think about that, how hypnosis helped you with your job, how you use that muscle memory thing where you'd write down all these words to match certain situations, and I think we just came up with an idea.
There we go. Audible, here I come.
Tom, you're the best. Thanks so much for being on, pal.
All right, Kenny, all the best. We'll see you around campus.
I can't wait.
This summer.
Yeah, definitely. The legendary Tom Durkin right here on the Horse Racing Show. More after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for watching and liking us on YouTube, subscribing to that. You can listen to us as well on Google Play and listen to us on iTunes. And we talk about having guests on that are friends of mine and people I've worked with. And there's no one that fits this better than Amy Zimmerman, who is a producer with NBC, handles the Triple Crown, the Breeders' Cup, and the Summer Racing Series. She is also the vice president at Santa Anita. We met in kindergarten. Let's say that. That's not necessarily true, but we have known each other for over 30 years. And Amy joins us from Los Angeles now. Hello, Amy.
Hello, Kenny. Not quite kindergarten, but darn close enough.
Close enough. That's what I'm sticking with. How about that?
That'll work.
And not coincidentally, we met around horse racing. So that's what you'd expect, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. My first recollection of meeting you, Kenny, was in Kentucky after a Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, I guess that would be right. Yeah. Wow. And you started at Santa Anita at the Breeders' Cup, right?
I did. I actually have done all of the Breeders' Cups, which I don't know if you and I have ever talked about.
No.
I worked the very first Breeders' Cup for Tracy Gantz and Thoroughbred of California magazine. And I worked the second Breeders' Cup for Hammond Productions, which is now Hammond Communications, in '85. But no, I've been at Santa Anita since '86, and I've done all the Breeders' Cups since then.
Now, how does a California girl grow up, and was it just an automatic that you grew up around horses, or that you would become a horse racing fan, much less winner of almost like over 24 Eclipse awards? Was that a thing that was going to happen with you, horses, when you were a kid?
I didn't grow up around horses. My dad's a doctor, my mom's a nurse, and that was not in our wheelhouse. But I was a little kid that always liked horses. For my 7-year-old birthday, all I wanted was horseback riding lessons. And in a time that was much different than today in Los Angeles, you could go to the local riding stable in the middle of LA and find a place to ride. And I had riding lessons. My dad actually took riding lessons with me. And then we moved when I was 10 to an area where you could have a horse in the backyard. And we did. And when I was about 11 or 12, Secretariat won the Triple Crown. The end.
Oh, wow, yeah. And
I come to find out many years later, which I did not know when I was a child, that my mom actually rode when she was younger, and when she was a teenager, actually rode in Madison Square Garden. So I never knew that when I was a kid growing up around horses.
Wow, and that's top of the line, Madison Square Garden. When you're riding in a horse show there, I think even those people hanging around the track today trying to, to wheel that and see if they can get that pick 4 today. No, you ride in Madison Square Garden, it's a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal, and I did not know that then, which is really a credit to my mom for the fact that she never pushed. It was never her dream. It was always whatever we wanted to dream.
Well, I will say this. You've inherited a lot of that because you're one of the more modest people I know that's won, like 26. You've been individually or part of like 26 Eclipse Awards and national Emmys and regional Emmys, and you never talk about it. If I ever won anything, I'd tell people. But, one day.
Well, now wait, you've won.
Okay.
Come on. Yeah, don't kid a kidder.
One day. But, Amy, you were one of the first. You were one of the early in the horse racing game. There were not a lot of women moving into executive positions like you have with Santa Anita. There were not a lot of women moving into TV trucks and being a producer on horse racing shows. I guess a lot of that was set up in your meetings, maybe with Penny Chenery. I know you had a great friendship with her, and we both had the privilege of speaking at a memorial service to honor her a couple of years back here at Keeneland. But I guess that, she was kind of one of the ladies that opened the door for a lot of other young women coming up that said, I can do something in horse racing other than go to the track and applaud the horses running by.
She really did, and I was very fortunate to grow up in an environment in my family and among my peers where I didn't ever think that you couldn't do something because you're a woman. To me, it was always a frame of reference as if you were good enough, you could do anything you wanted to. The fact that was even a barrier gate to some people is kind of comical to me because it never hit my radar screen until I was an older child. Sometimes people will ask me, and a very nice woman the other day from the Godolphin Flying Start program asked me, what is it like to be a woman in this business? And I told her quite honestly, I really don't ever think about that unless somebody asks me the question. Because I never view myself that way. It's been sort of interesting, Kenny, watching the World Cup coverage these last few days because I remember when I was in 5th grade, we had just moved, and my mom wanted me to meet some new people because it's a new school. You're in 5th grade; it's kind of a tough age. So they were just starting up a girls' soccer team, and this is 1971. It was the year before Title IX. And there were a couple of AYSO teams in L.A. that decided they were going to start playing girls soccer. And I played on one of the first girls soccer teams that they had in AYSO. And we didn't even have uniforms because it came together so fast. We all played with those silly penny things that they, that like a groom wears when they take a horse over to the racetrack. But to sit there and to watch that, to watch how the country's been just, overtaken with women's soccer and knowing where that started it's really been a sort of an interesting ride.
And it's been, the times we've had together, just always a pleasure. And I love to come out to Santa Anita. And, every time I look around that track, and you get to do it every day. And we talked about this last week on the show, about the history out there. Hey, Seabiscuit was like probably right there, all the way to Zenyatta right there, and then Shoemaker and Ben Kai, and I'm going to miss name. I'll start mentioning the Studi brothers. I'll miss somebody out there. Van Berg, Charlie Whittingham. First time I met him. First time I met Pat Valenzuela was at Santa Anita. I think about those. A good friend that we both have, Dennis Lynch. I remember going out there with him to Santa Anita back in the 80s. Was the first time that I went to that track. Do you ever walk out and go, wow, I'm at Santa Anita? Because sometimes I take it for granted. Here in Kentucky, you go out to a horse farm, you go and people visit, and they go, wow, this is something. I go, yeah, I drive by here about every day. Yeah, I guess it is.
Every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day. I think about it, and I think about Charlie and Shu and Lafitte. And, it's hard not to forget Zenyatta and John because their statues are sitting there in the garden. But, we've had a lot of people come and go at Santa Anita. And, we've been owned by 4 or 5 different companies since I've been here. The loyalty that I have and the loyalty that most of us have here, I'm sure it's to the people that sign your paycheck, but most importantly, it's to the people that came before. It's to the horses that came before. We are Santa Anita, and I still strongly believe with every fiber of my being that we are the great race place.
Yeah, and still, I would challenge anyone to say there's a better backdrop than those San Gabriel Mountains on a clear day, and you're out there at Clocker's Corner. It's just something else. And I'm glad you said that, my friend, because with all the talk of Santa Anita, we're not going to rehash that. I told you we relived it enough. I think people like you, the people that I've known well, and you're really the one that I know the best out there, obviously, it means something, and it's more than just a racetrack, and the people that work on the backside, it's more than just a racetrack, and the love they have for the sport and for the horses and the people involved, sometimes gets pushed aside with the obvious news reporting at times. But, that's the nature of our business. As you know, sadly, sometimes the human element gets a little lost in the fray of let's just give you all the stats and the facts as we think we know it.
No, absolutely. And, look, horse racing is at a point of reckoning, not just here, but around the country. And it's going to need to adapt and change in order to survive. And I will say that I'm extremely proud to work for the company that is, leading the way in those reforms.
This year we come off a Triple Crown, Amy, that I'm sure we'll never forget, as if we would never forget American Pharoah and Justify in recent years. Who would ever forget that? Or California Chrome's Almost, or I'll Have Another's, scratch the day before that we've all been through. But I don't know if we'll ever experience a Triple Crown like we just went through. And, you're in the truck really in there working with Rob Hyland and everybody else, Drew Esikoff, trying to get all the information. And I'm just standing out there and you tell me when to talk. And especially after the Derby, which was like 2.5, 3 hours, wasn't it? No, it's only 22 minutes, but it seemed like 2.5 or 3 hours.
Like 2.5 or 3 hours after the horse crossed the wire.
Yeah. I'm sitting there, and I remember going up to Bill Mott, and one of the first things he said, and I can't remember exactly because I'm listening, I'm waiting, and all that, like everybody else. And he said, "How long do you think this is going to take?" I said, "Forever." That was the answer I gave him, forever, because at that stage, who knew? Because I think it had already been about 4 or 5 minutes when I went up to him at that time.
No, absolutely. And we try, as you know, Kenny, from being in those meetings, we try really hard to prepare for every circumstance. And I actually found an email the other day from mid-April. It was a correspondence with Betsy Riley, who, as you know, is our associate director. And the question was, if there is a photo or if there is an inquiry, how do we get that information? Just confirming that the information trail is correct. And do we, and as far as cueing the track announcer, Travis Stone, we had this whole conversation, this whole thing laid out. So, we really do. We weren't surprised by the scenario. We were surprised by how the scenario transpired, but we weren't surprised that one happened.
Talking with Amy Zimmerman, Vice President at Santa Anita, and also multiple Eclipse and Emmy award-winning producer with NBC, handling the summer racing series. And let's go back to coming up on about a year ago. Amy and I spent 4.5 years, actually it was 2.5 weeks, covering
underwater.
covering the World Equestrian Games in Tryon, North Carolina, and I can honestly say it was the toughest assignment I've ever had with NBC. And if Amy hadn't been there, I wouldn't have made it through because, look, I give them credit. For those that follow the World Equestrian Games, Canada was supposed to have it. They backed out. U.S. had about 2 years to get it ready. Tryon said they'd step in. They did have the facilities ready, not all the infrastructure, and there was some confusion, and it was hot and humid, and a hurricane was coming in. But aside from that, it was a walk in the park, Ames.
Well, and the fact that our the venue was right next to the hotel, that made it.
Yeah, we drove almost an hour every day to work. It's the longest drive.
And home from work.
And home from work. So 2 hours a day, Amy and I are in the car, and fortunately, she's got great musical taste, so that was fun, and we had great conversations. And then we'd show up, and I'd go back to the room at night, and you know, there'd be like orange, kind of reddish orange stuff all around my watch band from that kind of clay that they have there in the deep south, you know, and it'd be dusty. But that was an experience that, like, I don't know. I mean, if you go, I'll go again, but I don't know if we'll ever have something like that again.
I don't know, Kenny. I don't know if I'll ever have anything like that again. It was an interesting experience, and I'm very, very grateful that you were there with me because you made what could have been an incredibly trying time actually a lot of fun.
I remember the day we went over on the Sunday, the first Sunday of it. Remember when they postponed it for a day because the hurricane was coming more inland. There was rain, some wind, but we didn't get exactly what they thought we would get. Thank God we didn't get that. But I was out there in that Jim Cantori Michelin jumpsuit, whatever it's called, rain suit, you know. And it's just like, it was you and I and the photographer out there. I think there's like
it was you and I and the photographer. And if you remember, they kept calling me from Stanford, from, you know, the NBC risk managers are calling me, telling us to get out of there because the hurricane's there, and you know, and it's terrible. It's like, really, dude, because it's just barely raining.
I know. I felt like I should lean, you know, like some of those guys doing those, like the hurricane's coming in, I can barely stand up.
I mean, we had about 8 times that weather at the Derby this year.
Speaking of, do you think we'll get a Derby without rain? I don't know. It's just it last year especially. This year, you know, it kind of comes in, and it came in hard quickly. But last year, there was like no let up. I mean, you know, I looked back at the opening stand-up I did talking about Justify, and the rain is pounding off the umbrella so hard there. I'm just outside of Shed Row. I felt like I was screaming at people.
No, and you know what? It's a great point, Kenny, because one of the things is that a lot of people don't give enough credit to the tech staff at NBC.
Yeah.
I mean, and led by John Roche and Ken. I mean, these guys, the fact that we're able to do what we're able to do in conditions like that, it's phenomenal. And, you know, it would be very easy to say, hey, you know, it's electric stuff, it's not going to work in the rain. But they keep everything going, and you guys on the air and us, you know, the ability to communicate with you, it's really quite staggering.
Do you have a favorite Derby or Derbies? I mean, I'll say, because we covered so many, you know, obviously it's hard with the 2 Triple Crown winners recently. You know, I got to put them up there. Smarty Jones was another year that was just a lot of fun for me. Getting to know John Service kind of came out of nowhere. And I was out there when he won the Arkansas Derby. The NBC gave me that assignment that year. You know, I mean, so, you know, those are moments like that, but it would be hard to say. Pharoah to me is the one that's going to stick out because it has, you know, it hadn't happened. Not to take it, you know, Justify was still spectacular last year, you know, what he accomplished. But, you know, I think of those things. Do you have like 2 or 3 that just, you go, wow, you know, of all the ones, I like them all, but those are just something special?
Pharoah's Belmont will always stand out to me because, you know, as a kid who came in to the sport with Secretariat, and then you get spoiled because you have Seattle Slew and Affirmed, right, you know, lickety split on top of it. You think, wow, this is easy. This is going to happen all the time. And so that, you know, the fact that we had been so close so many times and Pharoah hadn't gotten it done. And I remember I was fortunate enough to go see Penny Chenery we did a tease for the Belmont Stakes with NBC. So I went to her home in Boulder just, you know, a week or so prior to the Belmont. And she asked me, she asked me before I even sat down, she said, you know, tell me, why does he run? I said, what? She says, no, why does Pharoah run? She says, because Secretariat ran because he wanted to win, and Riva ran because he was afraid. Why does run. I said, well, let's call Bob. So we texted Bob, and he says, nope, he runs because he wants to win. And then she got really quiet. She got this sort of faraway look in her eye, and she said, he's going to win the Triple Crown.
Yeah.
This horse is going to win the Triple Crown. And she had no intention of being there. She had said, and I had to tell you, when I spoke with her earlier that year in January, there was a shot that never made air after California Chrome won. It got beat in the Belmont Stakes. And I'll never forget it because it's one of those shots that's sort of seared into your memory. It was, everybody had sort of left the grandstand. And we had gone off the air, and it's a little bit like the air getting sucked out of the room, as you remember.
Right.
And I looked from the shot across the infield, and there was Penny sitting in her box all by herself at Belmont Park. And it was just like she was just taking in all the memories. And I asked her about that January. And I said, I asked her, I said, so tell me what you were thinking. And she looked me in the eye and she goes, there's not a chance in the world I'm going to tell you what I was thinking. And I said, I have a pretty good guess. And she says, well, your guess is probably dead on, but I'm not going to tell you. Yeah. And then she, of course, took a deep breath and then proceeded to tell me. And it was about the fact that, this is where her life had changed.
Yeah.
And, there are things that, just as I'm sure there's things that you and Penny talked about, there's things that are private and that, won't see the light of day. And, those are things that stayed tucked into my drawer here. But she believed that, she had at that time said goodbye to Belmont Park and to a large degree to the stage of thoroughbred racing. So for her to be back there at Belmont, to want to go back and see American Pharoah win the Belmont Stakes, she knew in her heart of hearts that this horse was going to get the job done.
Yeah.
So I mean,
that's great.
Not just for that memory, but for, just everything in the truck. And I took a picture with Rob Hyland and I right before we went on the air. There's about a 10-minute period of time where Billy Matthews gets out of the producer's seat when we go on the undercard race, and as you know, and then Rob slides in. It's kind of my chair's kind of musical chairs. I stay in place, and everybody else moves around me. And I grab my phone, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Smile." And he says, "Why?" I said, "Because we're going to want to remember this moment. This one we're going to want to remember."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Okay." So he smiled, and we did.
Oh, that's a great memory. That's the one I'll never forget. That's the one I'll never forget. I've never seen, because the crowd can be a little stoic and a little golf clapping and very congratulations, great sportsmanship, and there were people I didn't even know could still move, Amy, that wanted to touch Baffert because I'm with him and I'm going to interview him afterwards, and waiting till it all dies down and the crowd's as loud as I've ever heard at any sporting event. And, that's what I remember. Everybody just to pat him on the back, just to touch the guy that just won the Triple Crown. And that was just a great moment.
It really was. And I give so much credit to Bob and to the horse himself, because he was the kind of horse that, we were able to, we being the sport, was able to let people actually get up close and touch him and touch Pharoah, and to, he'd come out and he'd see people, and John Henry would have ripped your face off, but Pharoah would just let you get up close to them, and that's a very special, very, very special horse. And maybe the reason we had to wait so long is we had to wait for that.
Yeah, well put, as always. That's why you win all those awards. By the way, that was perfect. You summed it up.
I'm very fortunate to work with a lot of great people, yourself being right at the top of the list.
Well, I feel the same way, and thank you for being on this show with me, and we want to have you back and any time.
It would be a pleasure. Please give my love to your dad, okay?
And to your dad as well, and to Catherine and to Henry, and maybe we'll take him to another game sometime. We'll see a Lakers.
Oh, yeah, spoil my child some. Wait, Kenny Rice takes my son to a Lakers game, and his little buddy's dad. So talk about setting a high bar. The very first Lakers game he ever goes to, Henry is sitting in the owner's suite eating sushi with ice cream that's being made for him for dessert. Yeah, thanks a lot, Kenny.
I told him to expect that every time you take him, by the way.
So, yeah, we'll get right on that.
I just thought I'd throw that in. Ames, thanks so much.
I love you, Kenny. You know that.
I love you. Amy Zimmerman, Vice President of Santa Anita, producer extraordinaire, working on the NBC horse racing shows. And we'll have more in just a moment. "100 years ago, a horse named Sir Barton won the Triple Crown, which, as we talked about earlier, was not known as the Triple Crown at that time of his pioneering achievement. Jennifer Kelly has written a book about it called Sir Barton and the Making of the Triple Crown. And Jennifer joins us now from the beautiful state of Alabama. Jennifer, welcome into the Horse Racing Show.
Well, thank you guys so much. I'm excited to be here.
So how did you decide that this was the time for the book? I know it's the 100th anniversary, which seems like an obvious, but how does a person in Alabama, not a state known for racing, decide to write a book about the first Triple Crown winner?
Well, I've been a horse racing fan since I was a kid. And in the late 80s, when I got sucked into the sport, living in Alabama, your only exposure really to horse racing on television is through the Triple Crown. So it was a natural progression, as a new fan, to get really excited every year that the Triple Crown series came around, and watching horses like Sunday Silence, it go through the process and watching the preps. And so as an adult, I've built my library around finding more and more books on, famous horses in the sport, especially Triple Crown winners. And every time I would go looking for a book on Triple Crown, I would notice that the same narrative popped up continuously about Sir Barton. And I have an academic background. I've studied writing and I've studied history for a long time. And whenever you see the same story crop up over and over again about a certain figure, you kind of wonder, well, what else is there to the story? So given that the 100th anniversary was coming up, and then given that I suspected that no one else had written a book about him, I looked around and tried to find some way of satisfying my curiosity about the horse, and discovered that there really wasn't a lot of material out there beyond that, chapter in the inevitable book on the Triple Crown. So I took it upon myself, with all the hubris of a writer, to assume that I could be the one to do it.
Now, how's the response been? First off, I would imagine even horse racing fans probably had to scratch their head a little bit. I mean, 100 years ago, a long time, and I'm not sure, how popular, how famous Sir Barton is, even to some of the guys hanging out on the rail, trying to wheel trying to get a pick four. I'm not sure how popular he was with them. So how's the book been received, Jennifer?
Well, the book's has an amazing reception. I've been very lucky that I've been able to get the attention of people, across the country via social media. And then, when I go and do appearances, I just got back from Lexington this weekend and had 3 appearances, and everyone that I've spoken to has, received it with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of just interest. And I know, like me personally, I had Steve Bick on my side fairly early on. When I was doing an appearance at Churchill Downs, Mike Smith came up to me and said hi, and asked for a book to be signed. Kate and Bradar. I've had a lot of people, surprisingly, a lot of people be really interested in the story and be familiar with him, and his name, if not necessarily all the minutia of the story itself. And then from the average fan, I've noticed that quite a bit as well, because, most people get into the sport, via something like the Derby, or they're brought to the track as a child with, a parent or some other family member. And so they're interested in the history of the sport because they appreciate all of the traditions that bring us to this, Derby Day and all the fun of being at Churchill Downs, or going to Pimlico and appreciating that, Man o' War and Sir Barton and Seabiscuit and all these famous horses that run there. And same with Belmont. I mean, I know a lot of fans who, love current horses and fall in love over and over again with, figures like American Pharoah and Justify, but they are also appreciative of the horses that came before them to create this atmosphere where we are privileged enough to fall in love with these champions.
Talking with Jennifer Kelly, she's the author of Sir Barton and the Making of the Triple Crown. Now, without giving much away, because you want people to buy your book naturally, and it's available on Amazon and other outlets right now, what was the most intriguing thing that you found out during your research of Sir Barton?
All right, the most intriguing thing. Let's see. That's a really good question, and it's one that I find from day to day. I have a different thing that crops to mind. For me, I think the very first one was doing research on his run up to the Derby after having only started 6 times at 2. And having not been able to break his maiden, because I don't think from lack of skill or talent so much as just lack of opportunity, and then discovering that for years and years, I believed that he had been brought to Louisville solely to be a pacemaker for his stablemate, Billy Kelly. And then to find out, continuously through the coverage in newspapers leading up to Derby 1919, that instead, it was Sir Barton that they had assumed over and over again was the best chance for them to win the Derby. So that's the complete 180 from what you read in, any book on the Triple Crown, or any book that discusses Sir Barton at length. They just always he was brought into Louisville to be a pacemaker, when in reality, most sports writers at the time, and even a couple of other figures like Charles Granger, who was president of Churchill Downs in this era, saw Sir Barton as really the better choice of the horses that his owner had brought to Louisville for the Derby. So that really, really surprised me. And it makes me excited every time I get to talk about the horse, in different venues, to show people that in newspapers from that day.
Well, that's wonderful, and congratulations on the book, and my compliments on the extensive research you had to do going back 100 years, and Sir Barton was the one that set it up for everybody, the first Triple Crown winner. Jennifer Kelly has written the book, Sir Barton and the Making of the Triple Crown. You can check it out online, and Jennifer, I really appreciate your time and continued success with the book.
Thank you guys so much, and thanks for the opportunity to hang out with you guys today, Kenny. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's a great book. I hope you have a chance to take a look at it and learn more about the history of the sport, and we'll wrap it up when we come back here on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back in. We're getting ready to wrap up the 25th episode of the Horse Racing Show. We thank you for your support. Tell your friends about it, because it's a big deal. Scott Hall and Ben Chaffins tells Thomas and me every week it's a big deal to get these subscribers.
That's right. We'd like to get 1,000. I think we're halfway there.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
But we're getting downloaded like 15 countries, so that's pretty good. I mean, people, really a lot of, what happens, a lot of times we understand people listen, they watch it, but they don't subscribe to it. Mm-hmm. And we need the subscriptions, because then it shows that you got the subscriptions, then you get better placing.
It's free, everybody. It's not like you're subscribing to a magazine or to Netflix. YouTube subscriptions are free.
Thank you. Exactly. And same with iTunes and Google Play, right? Everything's free.
Free downloads.
It's free. We'll come to your house if you want.
That's not free, though.
Particularly if you live in Hawaii.
That's right.
All for Hawaiian listeners, we may take a business trip. That would be fun. Okay, so again, great guest today, Amy Zimmerman, one of my dearest friends, producer with NBC. I liked what she said about Santa Anita. She's a vice president out there. It's close to her heart. It really is. And like we forget sometimes, those people got jobs. Mm-hmm. These are people that working out there. It's important to them, and they have great care for the horses, and they want it to continue. And then Jennifer Kelly, Sir Barton and the Making of the Triple Crown. Get that book. I think if you like history, you'll enjoy that. Tom Durkin, legendary race caller, just a funny guy. And he was on Match Game and the $20,000 Pyramid. Which brings me to this. Your favorite game show, Thomas. Do you watch game shows? Maybe your generation doesn't. I don't know.
Not often. Not often. A lot of times it's, my mother loves to watch Family Feud.
Who doesn't?
So I do catch some Family Feud every now and again.
Scott?
I'd have to go, gosh, it's so boring, but Jeopardy.
Well, you see, you're more cerebral than I, so I can't watch Jeopardy. I can only do it like when they get to the sports questions. I did watch at the time no one could answer any of the football questions. Quantum physics they're breaking down.
That was a good
1600s literature, Roman Empire, but then they get a football and they don't know it.
Yeah.
See, I felt smart for just like 30, 40 seconds, pretty much, which sums up my life.
That's all the time you get.
That's all the time I got. Ben, do you have a favorite game show?
I was partial to The Price is Right.
You can't go wrong with that. The Price is Right, Family Feud. I love the Match Game, the old one. The other one, the old one with Gene Rayburn. Some of the things they've seen, if you Google some of that stuff, some of the innuendos they slid in there, like in the 60s and 70s, you go, wait a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa, Gene Rayburn, you're a funny guy. Peter Marshall, Hollywood Squares. Yep. Charlie Weaver, the Block. He was always down in that left corner. Charlie, look those up. You'll like that.
Yep.
Well, I tell you, I've captured my audience with that, haven't I?
We sure have, I tell you.
Then we'll start a horse racing game show.
Call it Win, Place, and Show.
Call it Win, Place, and Show. Wait there, we got to write that down. We already gave Durkin an idea earlier. Oh, now we got. Hey, get that copy written.
Yeah, we need patent department.
Yeah, go work on that, okay?
You got it.
All right. So,
Get to it.
Thanks again, Ben Chaffins, Thomas Kenny, and Scott Hall, as always. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Kenny Rice, and we'll see you and talk to you next week on episode 26 of what we call the Horse Racing Show. Maybe have a few trivia questions, prizes, cars. Right. Well, let's not get carried away. We'll see you next week.
Wow.